The pool war of Hawthorne Glen. It all began with a splash, so jarring it startled my German shepherd, Tyson, awake from his usual deep morning nap. That dog could sleep through fireworks and thunderstorms, but this noise was something else. At first, I thought maybe a tree had collapsed or a pipe had burst in the neighborhood. But then came the yelling shrill, indignant, unmistakably the voice of a woman who had never, not once in her entire life, been denied anything. I pulled open the blinds, still clutching my coffee, and looked out the window to a sight that nearly made me drop the mug. There she was, Vivian Withers, the self-appointed queen of our HOA, storming through my backyard in a leopard print swimsuit, clipboard raised like a royal scepter, her platinum blonde bob bouncing with fury. Her adult son, Travis, who lived in her basement and wore board shorts in every season, had just cannonballed into my private pool. At 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, I blinked a few times, hoping I was hallucinating, but the shouting continued. "This pool belongs to the community," Vivian screeched, wading into the shallow end with a beach ball under one arm and an expression that suggested she believed she was leading a revolution. 3 months earlier, I had finally completed my dream backyard: custom stone tiles, temperature-controlled water, a waterfall feature, LED lights that change color at night, and my pride and joy, a bench submerged in the deep end with built-in jets. It wasn't just a pool. It was a culmination of overtime shifts, 3 years of scrimping, and one shady contractor who vanished with half my budget halfway through. But I finished it. I made it. It was mine. Or so I thought. Vivian lived 2 houses down. To the average outsider, she might seem like a charming retiree with a penchant for activism. But to anyone who'd lived in Hawthorne Glen for more than a week, she was a walking HOA enforcement unit. She patrolled the neighborhood like Buckingham Palace was hidden behind her vinyl siding, Bluetooth headset constantly chirping, iced caramel macchiato in hand, and a resting face that could curdle milk. She once fined me for non-compliant wind chimes. Another time, it was for unauthorized hammock fabric. I'd learned to ignore her. But ignoring Vivian was like ignoring a raccoon that found its way into your living room. It doesn't go away. It just climbs closer. Apparently, last week, Vivian had discovered an ancient, dust-covered HOA charter from 1993. Somewhere in its faded pages was a vague reference to shared recreational space and communal enjoyment of neighborhood amenities. There was no mention of specific facilities, no definition of shared. But Vivian, like a televangelist interpreting scripture, had decided that my pool, because it sat somewhat centrally within the cul-de-sac, was now community property. And to make things worse, she brought it to the board. 3 retirees, 2 of whom were her bridge partners, and a third, her cousin Frank, didn't exactly oppose her. They just nodded and said, "We'll look into it," which in Vivian speak meant, "Go ahead." That morning, as I stumbled out in slippers to confront her, I found not 1, not 2, but 4 people already lounging in my yard. A yoga mat was unfurled on my patio. A toddler floated by on a duck-shaped inflatable. A woman I had never seen before clipped her toenails while lounging on my deck chair. Reclaiming the space, Vivian chirped, "You've made it so lovely for all of us." At first, I laughed. Honestly, I thought it was a joke, a prank, a hidden camera show. But then she handed me a flyer: community pool hours, 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., with my address printed in bold. I stopped laughing. I asked her to leave. She refused. She flashed the ancient HOA charter like it was the Magna Carta. When I called it nonsense, she smirked and said, "We'll see about that," and cannonballed in after her son. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was war. The next week was a descent into absurdity. I installed security cameras. They captured teens doing belly flops, a man adjusting my grill settings mid-barbecue, and a woman who let her child pee in the shallow end while scrolling Facebook. I put up a sign: "Private property trespassers will be prosecuted." By sunrise, it had been replaced with "Public Pool 1 sponsored by the Hawthorne Glen HOA. Vivian was escalating, and I realized that unless I found a way to outmaneuver her, I'd lose everything I'd built. That's when I discovered the loophole. Buried deep in the municipal zoning ordinances was a line that changed everything. If a recreational facility accepts paid entry, it ceases to be considered a public or communal space and is reclassified as private commercial use. The idea struck me like lightning. If they wanted access, they'd have to pay. And nothing horrified Vivian more than spending a quarter. The next morning, I called the one person who owed me Big Carlos, the contractor who'd ghosted me mid-pool project. Sheepish but intrigued, he agreed to help. We installed a retro-style turnstile at the side gate, complete with a coin slot and a motion sensor. A handmade sign declared, 25 cents per person. No refunds. Cash only. By paying, you waive all HOA access claims. It was legal, laminated, glorious. When Vivian strutted by that afternoon, ice matcha in hand, she stopped cold. She stared at the gate like it had personally insulted her. Then she shouted, "What is this?" "Q-Splash Enterprises," I said with a grin. "Welcome to our grand opening." Word spread quickly. By 5 p.m., I had made $3.25 in quarters. Not much but enough for chlorine and a pizza crust. And for the first time in weeks, my yard felt like mine again. Of course, Vivian struck back. She arrived the next morning with a megaphone, screaming about community trust. She brought 6 people and a sign that read, HOA Greed. Someone played Enya on a boombox, probably to add emotional ambience. But the moment one of them climbed my fence, the motion alarm screamed like a banshee. She tumbled into a bush. I chuckled from the kitchen. That afternoon, I received an official violation letter. Unauthorized structural modification, inappropriate business operation, and creating a hostile community environment. I laughed. The city inspector had already signed off on everything that morning. A week later, Vivian called an emergency HOA meeting pool gate crisis in bold letters. I went, wearing a shirt that said, Private Property Enthusiast. She presented printed photos of the coin slot, dramatic close-ups, even a picture of a neighbor bending to pick up a quarter labeled Undignified Access. Then she waved the original 1993 charter like it was evidence at The Hague. I stood calmly, held up my temporary business license, and said, "I'm operating within Ordinance 12.4.8. Vivian hissed, "He's exploiting us." At 25 cents a swim, I said, "I'm barely breaking even on pool chemicals." The room laughed. Even Roy, the HOA president, muttered, "Not illegal." No vote. Vivian stormed out. But she wasn't finished. That night, the coin slot jammed. Security footage showed Vivian dressed in black, flashlight and mouth jamming gum, and a penny into the mechanism. The police chuckled when I showed them. She wearing a neighborhood watch hoodie while trespassing? Yup. 2 nights later, she escalated again. A full-blown poolside bachelorette party at my house. Invitations had my address. Guests arrived in gowns. One tried to insert a quarter into the gate like it was part of the fun. That's when I activated the deterrents. Motion-triggered speakers blasted barking dogs and sirens. Then came the sprinkler-shy pressure riot gray jets that drenched the entire crowd. People screamed. A flamingo float flew across the yard. Karen slipped on wet tile. The fire department showed up. "Who organized this?" they asked. Vivian tried to blame me. One of her guests turned on her. "You said this was your pool." Vivian's confidence deflated like a punctured beach ball. The sheriff came next. Vivian filed a complaint unauthorized business operation. But my documents were airtight. When she admitted to entering the property and organizing events, the sheriff gave her a warning for trespassing. A week later, a letter arrived. Vivian Withers was removed from the HOA board, effective immediately. To celebrate, I hosted the first official VIP pool party. Real friends invited guests, and yes, the coin slot stay because why not? The sheriff even dropped by and tossed in 2 quarters before doing a surprisingly graceful cannonball. And on the fence, someone had hung Vivian's old peacock swimsuit beneath a sign that read, Retired Villains Club. No one took credit. No one took it down. Vivian's house is quiet now. No flyers. No megapone. Just a lawn that's growing longer by the day. Some say she's moving. Others say she's just taking a break from leadership. Me? I just enjoy the peace. Sometimes I sit on the deck, watch the sun bounce off the water, and think about how it all started with one splash. And one woman who mistook entitlement for ownership. And how, sometimes, the only way to protect your peace is with a coin slot.